Good morning and welcome to our in-person audience and to those who are viewing our live streaming. My name is Lisa Gauthier. I'm a local resident, current mayor in the city of East Palo Alto, and a member of Stanford Medicine's, thank you, and a member of Stanford Medicine's Community Council. We all know that food choices affect our health and our longevity, but the choices are infinite and sometimes confusing. Today, I am thrilled to have the opportunity to introduce three of the nation's top experts in nutrition and the gut microbiome, who will guide us through the lifestyle changes that promote health and well-being. But before we get started, I want to remind our in-person audience and live stream audiences that we will be accepting questions via the QR code that you will find in your program or on screen if you're watching virtually. Our presentation this morning will be followed by a live Q&A. So get your questions ready, and if you have the QR code, we will be accepting questions. It is now my pleasure to introduce our panel. Justin Sonnenberg is a professor in the Department of Microbiology and Immunology, where he studies gut microbiota and health and disease and co-directs the Center of Human Microbiome Studies. Christopher Gardner is a professor of medicine at Stanford who for nearly 30 years has examined what to eat and what to avoid for optimum health and how to best motivate individuals to adopt healthy behaviors. Michelle Hauser is a board-certified specialist in internal medicine and culinary medicine. She is the director of obesity medicine at the Stanford Lifestyle and Weight Management Center. After training at Le Cordon Bleu, she earned her medical degree at Harvard Medical School. Please join me in welcoming our panel as Justin Sonnenberg begins the presentation.
Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Lisa, and it's wonderful to be here with this incredible group. With all of you, there's so many. I'd say hundreds of trillions, maybe? And it's nice to see that you brought your humans with you. So of course, I think about microbes all the time. I'm a microbiome scientist. And I think about microbes. I talk to them. They told me to target this talk today to humans. So I'm going to do my best. Yeah, so we are teeming with microbes. They're everywhere. They're on our skin, in our noses, mouths, through our digestive tract. For those of you that were here for the session before this, you heard a little bit about the gut microbiome. Most of our microbes reside in our distal gut. They actually are in our colon. We call this the gut microbiome. And we have an image of it here. Who thought that aspiring fecal matter could be so photogenic? So this is a cross-section of the colon, and we stain it with fluorescent probes and then look at it under a microscope. And so everything in the bottom right there is gut microbiota. Each one of those little colorful rods is a different bacterial cell, and they're incredibly close to our human tissue. So the blue area, those are colonocytes. That's the host. And the host is secreting that green area, the green mucus layer, that keeps the microbes in the right spot in our gut. So you've heard probably the phrase, good fences make good neighbors. That's true also for our gut microbes. We have to keep them in the right spot. So we have trillions of these in our gut. The number of collective genes is astounding. 99% of our genetic material is in our gut microbes, not in our human genome. And by cell number, we're more microbial than we are human, so it kind of reframes what we are as organisms. We're a walking ecosystem. We actually have this the equivalent of a microbial rainforest living inside of us. And one of the astounding things is how important this microbial community is to our health and how little we've paid attention to it over the course of human history, just becoming aware of it really and its importance over the past 10 to 15 years. And so we've known for some time that gut microbes are important in gut health. They're important in digestion. But what's been amazing is to understand how our gut microbes are connected to virtually all facets of our biology. So, metabolism and obesity, the food that you ate yesterday that's running through your digestive tract, whether that gets burned as calories, stored as fat, shoots right through you, is determined largely by the microbes that inhabit your gut. And because these microbes secrete little chemicals, they're conducting metabolism in your gut, those chemicals get absorbed into our bloodstream and can access virtually all tissues of our body. And so that means the likelihood of you fighting off a respiratory infection can be affected by your gut microbes. So we have these fundamental components of our immune system: autoimmune disease, immunotherapy. All of these things can be affected by gut microbes. And then, of course, many of you have probably heard of the brain-gut axis. These microbes can influence moods, behavior, neurodegeneration. So it's really a phenomenal community. And maybe you might be thinking, well, any part of our body can have this sort of incredible outsized impact on your biology if it goes awry. But what's amazing about our gut microbiome is that it's malleable. We can change it. So what we eat, antibiotics we take, various things we do with our lifestyle can totally change this community. And because the microbiome is different in each one of us, it will likely be a really important part of precision health. It'll be an aspect of our biology that we can change to change our biology in ways that benefit our health. But this malleable component of our biology also represents a vulnerability. It means that if we don't pay attention to this microbial community, we don't eat the right things and take care of these microbes, our health can go off the rails. And so deterioration of the microbiome is possible. We know that many aspects of the industrialized lifestyle that we all live can negatively impact gut microbes. So a lot of aspects of Western diet, antibiotics, incredible sanitation. So a lot of the things that actually protect us from infectious disease can actually be bad for our gut microbes. And so we're trying to figure out how to have the right balance where we're protected from infectious disease, but also take care of our gut microbes. So we know that if we change our gut microbes, we can fundamentally change our immune system. We also know that chronic inflammatory diseases are on the rise in the industrialized world. And these are all the diseases that we know and hear of commonly: autoimmune diseases, metabolic syndrome, many types of cancer are inflammatory. All of these diseases are going up in terms of prevalence. Age of onset is moving earlier. And in biomedicine, we're kind of at a loss here because we can just deal with people when they come in after they have a disease, and we're left with treating them with drugs that treat the symptoms. So a disease happens, you try to trim the branches of this tree as it grows and manage the symptoms, rarely reversing or curing the disease. And what we really want to know is, what is the root cause of this increase of chronic inflammatory diseases, and can we get out in front of it so that we live longer, healthier lives? And we think diet microbiome interactions are absolutely fundamental to this. So this is a big question. Can we repair our gut microbiome and improve our health? And how would we go about studying that? And so we started this Center for Human Microbiome Studies, an incredible group of partners here at Stanford. One of them, Christopher Gardner, conducts all of our dietary interventions. You'll hear more about those in a few minutes. But I came up in science learning to do basic research in model organisms, mouse models. And then ultimately, if you have an exciting finding, you try to translate that to human studies. The problem is that translational gap for the gut microbiome is really large, and it's very hard to translate findings in animal models to humans. And so we decided, well, let's flip this paradigm on its head. Let's do the experiments in humans first. And because we're doing dietary interventions and diet is considered safe, we can actually, in a safe, ethical way, perform experiments in humans using diet, survey the microbiome and aspects of health like the immune system and metabolism, learn the rules of how the diet microbiome health axis operates, and then reverse translate that back into mouse models, trying to understand the mechanisms, knowing that what we're studying in the animal models is relevant to humans because that's where we've started. And so that's the whole idea here. So this is really the cycle of discovery and an impact that we've been working on over the past 10 years to start with human studies, to actually find things that we know are fundamentally true for humans, to go study those in the lab and let those studies inform what other human studies we should be doing. So this cycle really fuels incredible discoveries. We publish a lot of high-impact papers with these findings. But one of the big issues we have is getting this information out to all of you. And so we really look for ways to have impact, to relate this information. We're grateful for this sort of opportunity to be able to communicate this science. But we also take part in documentaries, podcasts, online education courses. You'll be hearing more about these things. An important note in these human studies is that donors and community engagement is absolutely key. So our research is so cutting edge right now, it's not that compatible with conventional funding mechanisms. And so we really have to rely on donors. The vast majority of studies we've done have been donor supported, and we're incredibly grateful for that support. We also know that this cycle of discovery and innovation is fueled by the ecosystem that we're in. Stanford is an incredible place to do science. If you want to do comprehensive immune profiling, Mark Davis and Holden Maker have set up this incredible facility. Off a single blood draw, you can measure up to 350 different immune parameters, getting this high resolution image of what your immune status is at that moment and how that changes with dietary intervention and microbiome change. We also know Silicon Valley is known for its innovation and thinking differently about problems, and we really try to tap into that mindset and all of the resources that come with that. Quite often we think about the speeding bus test. So this is the idea that if I were to get hit by a speeding bus tomorrow, how different would science be 10 years from now? Would it just be a little bit different? Would it just be set back a few months? Is there another lab that's doing the same experiments that my lab is doing, and they're going to publish on the same findings in just a few months' time? If that's true, then I'm studying the wrong area. And what we really want to be doing is moving the needle in a big way by studying things that are paradigm changing, and that's really what we focus on. So we're mapping this axis with the idea that we can have personalized precision health, but that this could be microbiome focused. You'll go into the clinic, have your microbiome tested, we'll look at that profile, and then you'll be given a therapy, and that therapy may be microbiome targeted, a cocktail of microbes with foods that support those microbes to either treat a disease or prevent a disease that you're on the cusp of getting. So that's where we're headed, and I'll hand it over to my colleague, Christopher Gardner, to take it from here.
Started my clock so I don't get in trouble. Thank you for the great introduction. A huge shout out to Carla Scheifele, who put this all together, and an incredible team. I just want to take 10 seconds and ask, do I have any of your poop or blood in my freezer right now? Are you willing to raise your hand? I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, in terms of the community donating to this, we need your poop and blood. That's how we find stuff out. Risa Sharon's also here. For 2 decades, she helped design studies for the stuff that we're doing. It's so fun to see this community. Stanford is incredible. I'm in the middle of these 2 rock stars, which I think is super appropriate for enriching my life. I was at one time a philosophy major in college. Never thought I would be at the School of Medicine. And for about a couple decades, people say, so what do you do? Well, I don't know. I feed and bleed people, and I try to see what happens. And I published a lot of papers, and I got a lot of federal funding and donor funding, and it's really been a blast. But my life really changed when I met the Sonnenbergs, and this idea of a new outcome, a new approach to looking at health has been super exciting. So thank you guys for changing my whole existence here. He didn't plug it, so I'm going to shamelessly plug his book out here, The Good Gut. It's got recipes in it. I've got several copies signed at home if you need one. So contact me. You're not supposed to be able to read this. This is really the productivity that our combined teams, the Sonnenberg lab and the Gardner lab, have put together. Over 300 people, 94% retention in our studies, which is super great. Our staff keeps everybody engaged, gives everybody their results. So it's really been amazing working with them. Here's another shameless plug. we have an ongoing study funded by a Stanford alum of 130 pregnant moms where we track them in the second and third trimester. We get them to eat fiber and fermented food, or one or the other, or both or neither. And then we track their infants for 18 months after that. We're looking at the transfer of the maternal microbiome to the child. And we're at 115, and we need 130. Are there 15 pregnant women in the audience today? And if not, if you know someone who's pregnant, nutrition at stanford.edu, okay? Shameless plug. Just 15 more, and we'll be ready to stop recruitment. As Justin mentioned, we had a really great publication in Cell, people eating more fiber or fermented food. And this is covered in the New York Times. And a week after the study was in the New York Times, they had a follow-up. They had such an overwhelming request for where do we get the fiber in the fermented food that they had to follow up with another article for the readers. So it's a really hot topic right now. And we're really thrilled to be doing this. Another one that we just finished was it's going to be a 4-part Netflix docuseries. We took 22 pairs of identical twins, and one twin went vegan and one stayed omnivorous. And we bled them, and we pooped them, and we pushed them, and we shoved them. I'm going to be talking about what happened. They had some pretty interesting results. One was their LDL cholesterol went down. Another one was their trimethylamine oxide moved a bit. The really interesting one, and I heard this was part of a previous discussion, right? There was a longevity speaker before us. We tried this new diagnostic about not the biological age, but the functional age. And this had to do with telomeres and these clocks. They got younger. Somehow, in this 4-week study, they got younger. I'm not sure how much younger. I sort of looked at them and said, how many of you were the second twin, not the first twin? OK, well, the first twin, you are now younger than the second twin, because after being in this study for 4 weeks, I think you got like a couple minutes younger. I'm not sure if that was the amount. But anyways, really fun new outcomes and approaches to look at. So we've been doing lots of things like that. We're having a blast. And then the other thing that changed in my life was this possibility of working with chefs and food and taste. So on my left is getting microscopically small, and on my right is getting people to change what they're eating because it tastes good. It was like missing component of the first 20 years of my life. Here, please eat this cardboard. I know it doesn't taste good, but it'll lower your cholesterol. So I met Greg Drescher from the Culinary Institute of America, and he came up with this phrase, unapologetic deliciousness. Wouldn't you want to be served by somebody who's after the relentless pursuit of deliciousness? Doesn't that sound better than science? But we could do science and deliciousness at the same time. I worked with a group called the Menus of Change. It was actually a collaboration between Harvard and the Culinary Institute of America. And they came up with these 24 principles of the Menus of Change. And on the left, these are all operational for chefs and operators. On the right were the nutrition principles where the chefs were very frustrated that 1 week it was gluten-free, and then it was paleo, and then it was keto, and then it was vegan. And they wanted to get out in front of this. And they said, OK, what's really not going to change, and what's food-oriented? And so these 12 principles do have eat less sugar, eat less saturated fat, eat better salt, eat less salt. But it's also very positive. OK, so put legumes at the middle of the plate. Eat whole intact grains. Choose the healthier oils. Serve more kinds of seafood more often. And so it's really been fun thinking from a food perspective about this whole thing. So now it turns out that satellite school of the is in Napa. And so is a university research collaborative where we mess with the Napa folks. And we have 70 universities using their dining halls as living laboratories. And we're working with chefs. And I get to work with the illustrious Dr. Michelle Hauser, who took one of our old studies and looked very much at the quality of our food and the taste, not just the metabolic aspects. We put a paper together on food revolution for the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine. Scientific collaborator, but she's also an incredible chef. OK, can I draw attention to a minute to all the letters after her name? Look at that at the bottom. I have never seen that many letters before. So she's like not just a doctor, not just a chef. She is the smartest person in the world. And she makes great food. So at one point I got asked, you know, this whole food plant-based thing that you're pushing people toward, isn't that just like rice and beans? I'd rather have steak. Maybe you convinced me to have a Mediterranean diet, but no. Working with Michelle and others, it's not like that at all. It's like, how about 3 kinds of Mediterranean? How about one that has meat, one that's vegetarian, and one that's vegan? Those are all healthy for you. Those are all plant-based in this continuum of ways to eat. Who's had shakshuka and loves that? It's really sort of a beef and egg dish here. In the middle, they took out the beef, so that's just vegetarian. And on the right, I know it's a little hokey. They made little yellow squash look like eggs, so they took out. They all taste really good. Tacos, oh my God, what is more variable? Or, you know, you could play with tacos and make a meat one, a vegetarian one, a vegan one. They all taste good. A Korean fried chicken world bowl is full of veggies. And there's another one with egg, and there's a Buddha bowl. The biggest shift for me in that area has been, oh, what about fermented foods? What about Korean kimchi? Middle Eastern vegetable salad, Mediterranean roasted vegetables, kombucha tea. I'm on my 150th batch right now. I've been inspired by Justin. It's at home fermenting right now. A hummus sauerkraut salad. Yogurt's pretty commonly accepted fermented food. So at the end of the day, I'm not just a feeder and bleeder now. I'm a feeder, bleeder, pooper, cook. And it is really an honor to get to work with these two and so many others at Stanford. This is such a unique place. This is such a great place for breaking down silos and working with people in other disciplines and other domains, and with generous donors, and with generous participants who will bleed for us and poop for us. So thank you all for what you do, and thanks to Stanford for hosting this kind of thing for you all.
Well, those are 2 very difficult acts to follow, so I can't promise them to be that entertaining, but I'm going to do my best. And I will say, after all the kind things that Christopher said about me, he was actually my mentor and taught me how to do research with humans. So I used to do research at the bench and do genetic research way back when, and now I can do it with people. So fantastic. So I'll try and fill in the gaps of what hasn't been covered yet. So we'll take this from bench to literally bedside. So I want to introduce this idea of culinary medicine. So you heard that that was something that I do, but a lot of you might have thought, well, what the heck is that? So this is really this idea of this evidence-based field that brings together nutrition and culinary knowledge and skills to assist people in maintaining health. You know, ideally, we want to stay healthy, right? But then that fails, we want to prevent and treat disease. And this is, of course, in conjunction with appropriate medical care. So adding a really important tool to your toolbox. And so why are culinary medicine and, by extension, nutrition important? So we know that 80% of the chronic diseases that certainly I see in internal medicine, but that we see in the US as a whole group of doctors, are preventable through lifestyle changes. And even looking beyond lifestyle changes, when they analyze what's the #1 thing that contributes to disability and death in the US, and it's poor diet. So understandably, we're all here. There's many, many, many of you here today, and virtually, even more microbes. And maybe they're not so interested, who knows. But so we're all really interested in nutrition. So we go to our doctors, we ask them what we should be eating, and think we're getting some good information. But if you survey those doctors and ask, well, how confident do you feel advising people on what to eat, they say that they don't actually feel confident at all. And so this is really an enormous disconnect, right? So the #1 thing we could be addressing for health is not something that doctors feel confident talking about. And the reason that is obviously not because they're not super smart people. They are super smart people. But it's because just a tiny fraction, about 0.5% of the first 2 years of medical school, very little beyond that, is spent on nutrition and diet. So just a tiny fraction of that, obviously a big gap between 80% and 0.5%. And then when we look at what that time that is spent on nutrition is focused on, it's not really focused on anything that we as doctors could talk to you about if you came to see us in the office. It's really focused on, how does micronutrient work in the body? What sort of physiological or biochemical cycle does it facilitate? And then, additionally, little time is spent on how to effectively counsel or coach people to make changes. So you can see why they don't feel very confident in this. And then even for the doctors that do realize this is a huge gap, they go, they do continuing medical education, they get more training, they feel confident now. Then we put them in our traditional medical system, and they have these really short appointments, like half the time someone's got their hand on the doorknob, what do I need to talk to you about? Okay, I'll be back, we'll fix that. And there's not time to effectively coach someone on diet, even if they wanted to. So there's a lot of barriers here to addressing this. All right, so done with the doom and gloom. We know there's problems. So what can we do about it? So the gold standard for implementing culinary medicine in any sort of setting is really a teaching kitchen. And that's where you get in and actually cook, right? You just don't talk about cooking like we are now. In an ideal world, we'd be up here cooking right now. So sorry about that. Hopefully you can taste some delicious things when you're here. So a teaching kitchen is really the laboratory for nutrition, right? To show this, unapologetic deliciousness, this relentless pursuit of taste and flavor, to show that you can do that and have healthy food. So to really get at this, this disconnect. I think we all have grown up with this idea, you can have healthy food or you can have tasty food. And so we really want to all work to erase that idea and show that those can be the same thing. And so in teaching kitchens, you learn not only how to cook, but about nutrition and dietary behavior change as well. And I teach a course on this at Stanford. So this is the very first group that we taught back in 2017. You can see we look a lot younger there. Maybe all of us look a lot younger. Christopher's there too. And so this course is called The Doctors in the Kitchen. And it's a teaching kitchen elective for medical students, physician assistant students now that there's a PA program at Stanford. And we've actually had faculty start to join us as well. They both join to help teach the students and also to learn, which is great. And this is a quarter-long elective course. Students come once a week for 8 weeks and spend 2 hours. The first portion of that time, the first hour and a half, is cooking. And then the second half, or not half, I guess the last quarter, last 30 minutes would be where we're talking about how this applies to nutrition, counseling, making healthy diet changes. So they're sitting there eating this food. Maybe a lot of them come and they're kind of skeptical that this food can taste good, but they're really digging in, enjoying it. And that's when they're most receptive to learning this nutrition information. And then they practice coaching and counseling as well. And one of the really exciting things is we have faculty from all over campus, and actually the Bay Area, so have people come from Kaiser and elsewhere as well, not just locally on campus. Have had people, or doctors I should say, from 45 different specialties so far join. And they'll join for a session, and they'll talk to the students while we're eating about how what we learned is important to the field that they work in. And that's super important because many of these students taking the class are in their first 2 years of medical school. They're a little undifferentiated. They might not know what field of medicine they want to go into. But the real clear message that they're getting is that no matter what they do, nutrition is super important. So, and that includes, you might have seen I'm in the Department of Surgery. I'm not a surgeon, but we have many surgeons join us, and it is important in that field as well. I think people think that might not be, but it's very important. So the dietary focus that we have in the class is really just shifting along a spectrum. So you can see the pretty standard super processed American diet on the left. We call it the SAD. SAD diet is the acronym. And then trying to add in progressively more whole plant foods and really trying to make it clear that there's not some threshold you have to get to before you get a health benefit. Every change you make in a positive direction is going to help you, and the more changes you make, the better off you are. We need to add some fermented food in there, I can see. I do this with patients as well. So pre-pandemic, we used to do this mostly in person. You can see on the left is just a standard clinic conference room. It's actually at the Palo Alto VA. So I have a cart, wheel it in there, set up cooking equipment, and you can teach people pretty much in any space. And then when the pandemic started, shifted this to Zoom and virtual. So this is a picture of my kitchen I used to use with my computer to set up there to do it on Zoom. And over the course of the pandemic and this massive demand for people to get help with weight loss and improve their diet, our clinics, both at the Palo Alto VA and Stanford, have expanded to multiple states and certainly all across the state of California. So now I largely do this virtually because people aren't going to drive, from Idaho for a cooking class, multiple times a year. So, Okay, so shifting gears a little bit. So now that we're in the clinical space, I wanted to mention, kind of an elephant in the room for a lot of people, which is food insecurity. So this is an area that I focus on clinically, but also in research. And so food insecurity is just not having enough food to live a healthy and active life. And pre-pandemic, this was about 12% of people in the United States, a little bit higher in the Bay Area because it's a high cost of living area. And then shortly after the start of the pandemic, when we surveyed people, we found that about a third of people in the US were worried about their access to food. And so to talk about food and healthy eating and not address where people are going to get that food is another thing that we need to not ignore. If anyone here, family, friends, needs access to free healthy food or wants to know about free food resources in their area, that second bullet point, the feedingamerica.org website, you can go there anywhere in the US, type in your zip code, and it will show you all the free food resources near you. And you can actually ask specifically, if you call any of those, which ones have healthy food. A lot of them have fresh produce. So a long time from when I was younger and getting food bank food myself, and it was all just boxed, processed, canned things. Now there's a lot of fresh produce, so that's great. And then the reason that we care about this in a clinical setting is that it's really important to make sure that people have reliable access to healthy, affordable food for chronic disease prevention and management. So how we identify people with food insecurity is actually pretty simple, and I've been trying to push, along with many, many others, to get this to be a universal screening for adults. It has been for children for a long time, but to ask just these two simple questions, which basically reflect whether or not someone has run out of food or is worried they would run out of food before they could buy more. And if that's happened anytime in the last 12 months, either sometimes or often, then that counts as a positive screen, and those people should be identified and given access to free food resources. All right, but you don't want to screen people for something you can't do anything about. So some solutions that have been being implemented in this food as medicine movement are food pharmacies. So food pharmacies are kind of like a drug pharmacy. I wish they were as prevalent as CVS and Walgreens, but not there yet. So you bring your prescription from your doctor, and instead of getting drugs, you get food. And then often you get health education, maybe cooking demonstrations. You might get to meet with a dietitian and get connected with other food resources as well. This is one that I worked with San Mateo Medical Center and the Second Harvest Food Bank to put together for the patients I was seeing at the time at Fair Oaks Health Center in Redwood City. And so we would identify people with food insecurity and then diabetes, high blood pressure, or high cholesterol, and make sure that they and their families would get referred to this wellness pantry so they could go in, shop. It was like set up like a mini grocery store. Everything there was healthy. And they would meet with all the different specialists I mentioned already and get cooking and food tips. And what they might get would be pictured here. There's a lot of variety, but basically how it's set up is to reflect the healthy eating plate or my plate, so half your plate being fresh produce. Frozen is also okay. People always ask that. Whole grains as a quarter of your plate, and then lean proteins and low-fat dairy as another quarter of your plate. And that would count soy milk and other high calcium, higher protein, plant-based dairy substitutes as well. And then one of the last things I wanted to address is, the next step after that was really trying to see if this giving of free healthy food would actually make a health impact. So seemed like all the research out there suggested that it should, but let's actually measure it. This is a study that is run by Lisa Goldman-Rosas, and then Dr. Gardner and I are both co-investigators on this study, Vida Sana y Completa. And this is taking from San Mateo Medical Center multiple sites, Spanish-speaking Latina adults that both have obesity and food insecurity. And we had done a study previously looking at behavioral interventions to change lifestyle to help with obesity. And this was a really successful program in other populations, but it didn't work very well in this population. And then, looking at the data, found that we just happened to ask about food insecurity in the old study, found out that more than 50% of people didn't have access to healthy food. So, no wonder maybe our intervention didn't work. So trying to address that issue and to provide food and also do the behavioral intervention. So time will tell. We'll see if that works. And then if people are curious about this, reading more, want to nudge your doctor to have something like this available in their clinic, there's a free curriculum that is published online from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine that I put together, basically explaining, like soup to nuts, how you put together these culinary medicine sessions, courses, as a one-time thing or as a whole class. And some people download this. There's like 30 pages of just general nutrition information at the beginning and a whole bunch of recipes at the end. So if you want to download it, you can too. It's not like you have to prove you're a doctor to download it. And it's never too early to start cooking. So getting my kids in the kitchen there. And we're happy to take some questions.
Thank you so much to each of our panelists for that fascinating insights. I feel so bad, Justin. I had a donut this morning. And it was on your slide. We have a number of questions for you, but I want to remind the audience to please submit your questions via the QR code. The first question is for Justin. How do you know if microbiome diversity is optimal? Can I get tested? And there's another part to this. Are there any foods that affect the way microbiome in a dramatic way?
Yeah, this is a really common set of questions. Knowing what's happening in your gut microbiome is really difficult. It requires a bunch of specialized technologies, sequencing technologies. There are companies that offer tests to give you a measure of both the diversity of your gut microbiome and what species are there. I haven't validated any of these companies, but there are ones that are run by trusted scientists. So if you go in and you research and you find out that they're a company's scientific advisory board is full of reputable scientists, that's probably a pretty good sign. And you can get these tests and monitor your diversity. You can run little experiments on yourself, try different diets and see if your diversity changes. So there are ways to monitor that. If you don't want to do that, monitoring your stool consistency, regularity of bowel movements is a pretty good proxy. And you can, there's a Bristol stool chart that will guide you through what a good, healthy bowel movement should look like. But that won't tell you what species are present in your gut microbiome. In terms of the foods to eat, I think out of the studies that we've done together and other data in the field, it really, the high fiber plant-based diet along with fermented foods appears to be a great combination for trying to drive up your microbiome diversity and reap some of the benefits of this community. An occasional donut is fine.
All right. I only have one. Okay, that's good. Christopher, the next question's for you. I've heard conflicting findings about soybeans. Is soy good for you? Can it help with menopause symptoms? Or does it cause inflammation, cancer, or dementia?
Yeah, so this one comes up a lot. It really came up because of some different health disparity issues with Asian populations. They have fewer hip fractures. They don't complain of menopausal symptoms, different breast cancer rates. And what are the things they do differently? Soy. So there's actually these molecules in soy called phytoestrogens. It's a big family name. There's also daidgene and genistein and some other very specific ones. And I actually got millions of dollars to study these years ago, and I stopped. There was sort of a huge shift thinking these were superfoods, and they didn't pan out. And then there was this huge backlash, which I even saw on Twitter the other day. Will soy give you man boobs? I thought, no. The sumo wrestlers do other things when they wrestle. Come on, it's not a man boob thing. OBGYNs are very hesitant to tell women to take soy because of the phytoestrogen and because of some issues with hormone replacement therapy for women. But at the end of the day, if you look at all the data, soy is a pretty awesome food. It's actually got sort of a unique profile of fats, fewer carbs, more protein than other foods. It's got more omega-3 fats, but it's not a superfood. You should incorporate it with a lot of other good foods, and so don't go for the hype or the doom. It's just a good food, and it's not enough to get you through the day.
Thank you. Michelle, the next question is for you. A lot of people say if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic, you should limit the amount of fruit you eat. Where do you stand on that?
This is one of the #1 questions I get asked in clinic. You open up open questions to people, and then I spend 2 hours with patients. I'll see them in a group, and instead of seeing them one after the other, so I can have more time, which I was talking about was a barrier earlier. But so this question about fruit. So Whole fruit is really healthy for you, and I think it gets really demonized for whatever reason. Probably if you're, have significant fluctuation in your blood sugars, you probably don't want to have, 6 servings of fruit with nothing else when you sit down to eat. You want to make sure that your fruit isn't blended up into a smoothie or juice. When you blend up fruit into a smoothie or juice, you're really basically breaking down all the cell walls, making the sugar that's in there super easy to access. So as soon as it's hitting your tongue and your stomach, it's going straight into your bloodstream. When you have to grind it up with your teeth and grind it up with your stomach, it takes more time and it's more slowly released. So there's that. And then other things that you can do to make sure that you're having less of an impact on your blood sugar from fruit is to make sure to have it with something else. So if you have, anytime you're having any carbohydrate-rich food, you want to blunt the effect on your blood sugar, having it with some kind of healthy fat, high fiber. The fruit is already high fiber. And then some kind of healthy protein-rich food. All those things slow down digestion of sugars and digestion overall. And they not only help limit the impact on your blood sugar from fruit, but also help anytime you're limiting the impact on your blood sugar from anything, you're also kind of blunting your appetite. So the same tips I give to people for managing blood sugar also help keep an even keel on your appetite and make it easier to maintain your weight. So fruit is fine, but just don't have it as a smoothie or juice.
Thank you. All right, Justin, we're coming back to you. Should I be taking probiotics or other supplements? Is there a pill I can take to get the same benefit as eating fermented foods?
Yeah, another common question. We like to turn delicious food into pills when we can. So the probiotics issue is interesting. This is an industry that's booming. Because we have such individualized microbiomes, if you have found a probiotic that does something to you that you perceive as beneficial, you fine to keep taking it. I think there are very individualized aspects of probiotics. There's been a lot of really recent high quality science on probiotics, and a lot of the hype hasn't panned out when we've looked very carefully in studies. And there are even situations, we performed a study on a probiotic that was designed to actually help people deal with metabolic syndrome. Some of the people got better, some of the people actually got worse. And so there really does appear to be this kind of individualized aspect of probiotics. You're probably better off sticking with fermented foods where you get a diversity of microbes, but you get all the health benefits of the food as well, because there are a lot of microbial chemicals in the fermented food. And so the second part of this, can you get the same benefit from a pill as eating fermented food? There may actually come a day where we figure out the interesting, powerful molecules in the fermented foods and can give that as a pill, and you can get some of that benefit. But that actually is a horrifying thought to people like the three of us, where you can actually instead eat a delicious food and get all of the benefits. So it may be possible one day, but for now, you just eat delicious fermented foods.
Sounds like we're thinking about the Jetsons.
Yeah.
Christopher, next is for you. I've lost weight on the paleo diet, but can this way of life hamper my longevity?
Okay, before I do this, I quickly realized that I didn't end soy on a culinary aspect. Edamame is really good. Cooking with tempeh is really good. Tofu, soy, there's like a whole bunch of ways to use soy in a culinary way that are quite clever. Okay, sorry, back to this one. The paleo diet, I think, sounds very intuitive. It's like, oh my God, we evolved a long time ago eating different foods. Shouldn't we go back to that way of life? So those of you not familiar with it, I think the 3 basic tenets of this are no dairy, because there were no dairy herders in those days, no grains, because we hadn't had the green revolution, and no beans, which is the oddest one for me, because beans have got to be about the healthiest thing out there. And so we're talking about soybeans and kidney beans and refried beans and things like that. The reason people tend to lose weight on diets like these is because they're restrictive. If you wiped out all the dairy, all the grains, and all the beans, there's much fewer things to eat. And if there's fewer things to eat, then the palatability of the foods you can still eat kind of runs out. And you would be hungry if you could have something else, but you're not hungry for what's acceptable. I'm just thinking of missing all the nutrients in the grains and beans. So grains and beans across the planet are staples. They're inexpensively stored. They have fabulous shelf life. And so I have a problem with cutting those out. And I do think long term, there could be potential harm. So I'm not a proponent of the paleo diet. In fact, American Heart Association just came out with a diet patterns paper you might have seen in the news in the last couple of months, and we gave thumbs down to paleo and keto.
Thank you. Next is for Michelle.
I know.
I didn't like that. It's okay. Okay, this is for Michelle. I'm overweight. This is not my question, you guys. It's not my question. I'm overweight, but I do not have diabetes. Would taking a GLP-1 medication for weight loss help?
Probably. So yeah, good question. So this is what I spend, after I've been counseling everyone on lifestyle, this is what I spend a lot of my time on. So there are a few conditions out there that prevent people from, potentially safely taking these medications, but largely they're pretty safe medications. They're kind of a game changer in the field of weight loss. Some of the newer once-a-week injection agents on average lead to about 15% weight loss. So if you're not a percentage person, that's about 15 pounds for every 100 pounds you weigh. And then some of the combo drugs that have that type of medication combined with something else, one should be approved anywhere from tomorrow to end of the year, is about 15 to 20% weight loss. And then some in late phase trials are maybe up to 25%. Which is great. Thinking about, well, how does that compare to something like bariatric surgery? Bariatric surgery is on average 30%. So, 20 or 25 versus 30%. It's like, why not try this drug, which also they're showing can help prevent Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, has some protective effects on the heart, kidneys, liver. It's great medication. I don't get paid by the drug company, by the way. It's just like, I just see a lot of, it's really been a great thing. And it's, for the people it really works for, I have people crying every day where they're like, it was like a switch that turned off. I just constantly thought about food. It would just consume so much of my thoughts all day long, and it's just like, I just don't think about it. I, eat a reasonable portion, I'm satisfied with it, and then I go on about my day and I can focus on other things. And it's the first time I've had so many people say, I thought this was all my fault. It's very clear obesity is a disease like cancer, like diabetes. It's not a willpower related thing. I've never seen anyone in the office where it's purely a willpower related thing. And they're realize for the first time that, oh, if this is what other people that don't struggle with their weight feel like, it's so clear that they're feeling differently than I did, and it's not my fault. So it's a really great medication. So yeah, they're super helpful.
All right.
Last question, I guess.
Thank you. This is the last question for all three. How do we as consumers of news about nutrition research know what research findings to trust, especially given that much of the research seems to change or conflict with other research? Justin, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think this is an important one. I think one of the questions is, what is news? I think in this era where we're being bombarded by TikTok videos and social media and all sorts of information, how do you sift through all this? And I think it comes back to actually looking at the sources of the information, making sure that there's really solid science behind whatever's being studied. And then I think keeping in mind that probably no extremes are healthy. I mean, this gets back to one of the things that Christopher always talks about. Like, we see this big, wonderful signal in the study that we did on vegan, into the twin eating the vegan diet. But that doesn't mean you need to eat a vegan diet to reap that benefit. That you can eat plant-based, have occasional meat, have an occasional donut, just have the main tenets of what a healthy diet is and try to employ those, and you'll reap a lot of the benefits from that. A lot of the studies we do are incredibly small groups of people, exciting findings. They need to be replicated by other groups, and so the media will cover them, but you have to keep in mind that this is a continually evolving field where we're honing our knowledge. And so quite often the findings of a study get amplified in one direction by the media, and so you really have to understand that what you're probably seeing in the media has been amplified to some degree, and tempering that and understanding the basic fundamental findings is probably really important.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I disagree that there's a lot of confusion out there if you just look a little bit harder. So I've participated with the American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, Dietary Guidelines for Americans. When you get reputable scientists together looking at the evidence, we move at a glacial pace. They're like, can we change this little thing? No, that's too big of a leap. We need 100 new studies. Okay, let's just say again what we said last year. So really what it is it's social media and a lot of things out there, but I am currently devoting a lot of my time to a book. It was going to be called It Depends. It looks like it's now going to be called The Discerning Eater. And you don't have to buy it. I already wrote 100,000 words. I'm trying to get it published. But I can give you the 2 key statements in it. With what and instead of what? If you ask those 2 questions, you resolve almost all the controversies out there, because they said A is good for you, A is not good for you. You look. And one was in young, healthy people, and the other one was in older, sick people. And one was a longer period and a higher duration, a higher dose, and the other one was a smaller dose. When you put them all together, there's usually a lot of agreement. But the instead of what is really important. So, doc, I was going to have this thing. What were you going to have instead? Oh, well, I was going to have the other thing. And I said, well, I wasn't going to tell you to eat that, but now that I know what the other thing is, yes, you should eat that, because the other one was even worse. So that is sort of one of the ways to help resolve this controversy. With what instead of what?
Thank you.
And I've completely stolen exactly what you said and use it with patients all the time, because it's always like, what does this fill in the blank? Will it fix all of my problems? You know, yeah, with what instead of what. So a couple quick comments. So with nutrition research, and probably Christopher is a better one to speak to this than me, but it's really hard to study, you know, what's going to help you live longer and what's the optimal diet for you to have, because we can't put, you know, 100,000 of you in a hospital and control exactly what you eat and everything else you do for a lifetime worth of time, and then analyze it and then tell you. And everyone's a little bit different. So the best we can do is do these shorter term studies where we look at markers of health, like, you know, blood sugars, cholesterol levels, functional microbiome, things like that, and then have a good guess. If you're actually looking at studies, if you see meta-analyses, you see studies where they're basically taking a whole bunch of studies that looked at a similar thing and then averaging the results together, those tend to be, you know, better level of data. If you have, you know, some of the studies out of Harvard where they look at, you know, 100,000 nurses or 100,000 physicians over many decades of time, they collect a lot of data about them, and then they can draw conclusions about health and wellness from some of the lifestyle things that they do. Those are pretty good, you know, pretty reputable studies that you can hang your hat on. But in general, I think when we look at all these different diets and look at the healthfulness of them, it's pretty clear that at least 75% of your plate should be, you know, whole plant foods. The other 25%, if you want to be vegetarian, great, that's super healthy. You want to be vegan, great, that's super healthy. If you want to have some meat, as long as you're otherwise having a very healthy diet, it's probably fine. And I think that's the biggest take home. It's just like, instead of focusing on what to cut out, try and really focus on what to put in, like all those whole plant foods. Having a positive framing of what you're doing is a lot more satisfying, makes you enjoy your food more, and it just crowds out a lot of things that you would have otherwise been having to sit and feel restricted about telling yourself not to eat. So I hope that is helpful.
It was. Thank you so much. Boy, time flies when you're having fun. Many thanks to each of you for sharing your research with us. I hope the information presented today will be helpful in creating your own healthy goals.